All righty. Thank you. Go ahead and find your seats. We're going to begin now, actually. Alrighty. Thank you for being here. For those of you at home, I am so sorry for the delay. The sermon went long. You may have been watching that or maybe not. We're still figuring out this technology, and yes, thank you for being here. Technically, we don't need a quorum. It's not actually a congregational meeting. There's no vote, so welcome. We have a quorum, but welcome. It's good to see you all. We're in a moment going to start by going over finances. If you are a numbers person and want to see the numbers in front of you, because on the screen it's going to be pretty small print, will you just raise your hand and Lisa and Dave can bring you the actual number slides. So raise your hand if you would like the financial information that's going to be presented in a moment, and we'll get that to you. Just so you know, the paper that you're holding onto does not have every slide you're going to see, but it has the number slides you're going to see, just because we know numbers are tiny and important. Right, Warren? Okay. Let me go ahead and I'm going to pray and open this time. Keep your hand raised, and the information should come to you in a moment. Jesus, be with us. Thank you. Jesus, we know that business and insider language with life of the church is not the most important stuff in the world, and yet you've called us to serve you in this context, in this place, and we want to be faithful to your call in our lives. We want to be transparent and honest and open. And so God, guide us, be with us this meeting. Might the same grace you give to us daily be something that we administer to one another. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay. Kathy, you were so good. Kathy has got the slide going. All right, so I would like to invite Warren Nelson. Warren is our treasurer. He's been our treasurer for years now. Warren is going to give us a sort of do the bulk of the financial update, which again, your papers won't include all of the slides, so make sure you're watching Warren and your slides. And then if you have questions at the end of his presentation, we have a microphone right here that you can come up to and ask questions. Warren is going to, once Warren is done, Chris Meyer is going to come up, who's an elder in charge of admin. And so let's actually hold off all of our financial questions till both of them are done presenting, and then feel free to come on up here and you can ask some questions.
Can everybody hear me okay? All right, very good. Yeah, I love numbers. All right, so let's have the first slide, please. Okay, so I think it's always good to let everybody know what we're going to go over, okay? So, a little closer? Oh, sure. Why not? Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to analyze results as of and for the 18-month period ended June 30, 2021. So we're going to go over a 21-month period of, 18-month period of results, and then we're going to look at the balance sheet as of June 30, and we're going to explain to you the loan we took out, the PPP loan. You might be familiar with that. We're going to go over income and expenses for the past 18 months. We're then going to show you what happened with cash for the last 18 months, and then I've got some summary comments. And just so everybody's information, Sharon gives me numbers every month, and then I write a report to the session, copy David, on what's happening with the finances of the church. And that report is open to anybody that wants to get a copy. All you have to do is get in the office, and they'll give you one. Okay, first slide. All right, everybody can see this okay? All right, so, and I'll explain it. So, cash. We have cash and equivalents of $301,000 as of June 30. About 46,000 of that is in the form of a mutual fund, okay? But it's liquid, so we call it an equivalent. So we've got $301,000 of cash and equivalents at June 30. Now, our cost basis of our campus, that is what we paid for those assets, are $2,340,000 approximately. And you depreciate that to show declining value. And we depreciate that on a straight line basis over 25 years. So accumulated depreciation is $1,760,000, leaving a cost basis of the value of the campus of $580,000. Now, the fair market value of this land's about $9 million, but that's not how you do accounting. You do it on the cost basis. So we have two primary assets: cash and equivalents of $301,000, and then cost basis of property, plant, and equipment, $580,000. So total assets on the books of the church are $880,900. Okay? Now, liabilities. We have one liability, $1,700 in payroll taxes. The rest is equity. Okay? You have designated equity and non-designated equity. Designated equity is money that is specifically earmarked for a specific cause, like missions, or David's sabbatical, or MOPS. We have a few, okay? Now, as I was sitting back there listening to the sermon and kind of looking at this, I realized, oops, I've got a goof in the numbers. So you see where it says non-designated equity of $831,500? Wrong. It's $829,800. Not a big deal, but now it adds up, okay? So again, this number, $831,500, should be $829,800, okay? But the whole thing adds up to $880,000. Almost all equity. We have almost no liabilities. Okay, that's the balance sheet of the church. Now, if you are aware, you know, we had COVID and it shut down the economy, and the Congress and the Small Business Administration, in an effort to keep people employed, started what's called a Paycheck Protection Program loan. And many, many millions of companies and nonprofits availed themselves of those loans. And you were allowed to do that if you felt that there was some uncertainty about retaining employees, which we could affirmatively state. So we applied for a paycheck protection loan in the amount of $112,102, or 2.5 times eligible payroll. For some reason, they gave us $15,000 less than that. They never explained why. The bank didn't know why, but we took the $97,000, okay? And why? Because when COVID shut down and when the church, in effect, shut down, we didn't know what offerings were going to be. So we felt justified in obtaining this loan, which we did obtain. And we used it for the designated purpose in which it was authorized, to pay payroll and to pay, to some degree, utilities, which are also eligible under that plan. And we have applied for forgiveness, which we will get. I'm familiar with a lot of these loans and different entities I'm involved with. They've almost all now been forgiven. Ours will be forgiven too, and there's no interest associated with that. And now we'll report when it is forgiven, but in a matter of months or so, it will be forgiven. Now, there was a second eligibility for a PPP loan, but by that time we knew we didn't have any risk, so we did not apply for that loan. All right, moving on. Now let's look at income and expenses for the past 18 months. This is for the period January 1, 2020 through June 30, 2021. All right, offerings and other income, $966,000. That's the income, cash income of the church for the past 18 months. Expenses total $850,100. And what are our expenses? Our expenses are staff costs, institutional costs. What are institutional costs? They're insurance, running all this campus, utilities, office costs, all campus maintenance. That is all institutional. And there's some others. And if you want more detail after the meeting, I've got all kinds of detail I can give you. But that represents most of what institutional is. We also have mission giving. We give a percentage of our receipts and that is missions that we give out of the general fund. As you'll see in a minute, we also give some money out of the specific mission fund. So mission giving over the past 18 months was $83,800. We support the presbytery, and we gave them $31,600 over the past 18 months. There's also worship expenses and some other expenses relating to youth, deacons, etc. So total expenses over the past 18 months, $850,000. The IRA, the mutual funds we have that are in an IRA, they've gone up in value. They went up $6,500 in that 18-month period. And so the net surplus of the church of the past 18 months was $122,200. But included in that number is $97,102 of the PPP loan. Okay? So remember that $122,200. All right, next slide. Cash. What happened to cash in the church over the past 18 months? And by the way, this is the kind of information that's in that monthly report that I give to the session every month. Cash a year and a half ago was $205,600. We got the PPP loan of $97,100. And then remember the $122,000 I talked about just previously of surplus? If you take the $122,000, subtract the $97,000, that's surplus less PPP loan of $25,100. Now, remember we talked about designated funds. There's a mission designated fund. And we spent $17,500 out of that designated fund over the past 18 months, in addition to the $83,000 that we allocate to missions every week. Okay? Then, in accordance with the Fitch family, there was some money brought in for relating to Bob's memorial service, and that money was given to charity. That was $11,200. There was now designated accounts. If we take money and we put it into a designated account, it's like a deposit. So in effect, cash doesn't go down. If your designated accounts go up, that means you haven't spent the cash. This is accounting. Isn't it exciting? Anyway, and then current liabilities went up, and if current liabilities go up, you don't spend the cash, so that's a positive too. So at the end of June, that's how we get to the $300,900 of cash and equivalents that we have in the church. Okay? Now, summary comments. In my opinion, the financial condition of our church is good. It's good. It's strong. Now, you all know accounting terms like plus, minus, multiplies, and X, and division. So actually, they didn't print what I wrote here.
No, it's next slide.
Oh, okay, I need the next slide. Technical difficulties. There we go. See the happy face? That's not actually an accounting term, but I put it there anyway. Okay? Because we have no debt. So, you know how we applaud after songs? Let's give that a round of applause. Okay? Our church has no debt. Now, in the past, in April, it was around April time, wasn't it? Yeah, we had staff reductions. And the total aggregate cost of that, including benefits, et cetera, of the staff reductions, reduced expenses $209,600. Okay? That's the reason these staff reductions needed to occur. Our spending rate was too high based on the financial condition of the church. Now, bless you. And so if you take the amount we spent as a result, as a percentage of giving, that 80-some thousand, and then the amount that we've taken directly out of the mission funds, total mission payments over the past 18 months have been $101,300. So thank you for being faithful givers. We didn't know how it was going to turn out, but it turned out strong. You all did just a great job. You're to be applauded, and our church is in good shape. Thank you.
I was 37 years old. I was 37 years old when I first walked into this church. Kathy, the next slide. Thank you. So there's information on this slide, and you can read it, but my point is I was 37 years old when I walked in this church, and it was the little things that caused my wife, my 2 daughters, and myself to not look at any other churches. The campus was alive. And so as you look at the screen behind us, you see the first half of the year when the campus was essentially shut down. And now we're going into the second half of the year, and the campus is coming back to life. And our church is going to be a place where people come in, and hopefully they're going to feel what I felt when I was 37 years old. I think we all have memories of this church, and it's the little things many times that make a house a home. Well, those little things cost a little bit of extra money. So if you look at the second half of the year, what you see is what we expect to spend. The session, when we set the budget for this year, we knew that we would be spending less in the first half and a little bit more in the second half. Also, if you look at the numbers here, you see that we didn't quite cover our spending with the giving in the first half. So I'm not putting this up here to encourage you to give more, because maybe you're giving the appropriate amount for yourself at the moment. I'm giving it to you for your awareness, that you can see that we're going into the second half of the year, and we're going to open up the nursery. We're adding music, live music. Eventually, we're going to have coffee again, and all of these things. And we're going to clean the place. We're going to pay for more custodial work. So, as a steward, I just want you to recognize that we are being very careful with how we spend, but you're going to see approximately a 20% uptick in our spending as we go into the second half, as we make our house a home. So just continue to be faithful. We're very blessed. Warren is absolutely right. We're not concerned, but we wanted to make sure that you had the same view that we do of how we're doing financially. So with that, David, I want to give this to you, and thank you all for the last 19 years at this church. Now you can do the math.
Any questions? Any questions regarding finances? Anything that's been presented? You can feel free to come up. Good work, guys.
All right.
Wow. I have to say thank you to Warren and Chris. Seriously. Oh, come on up, Lisa. Lisa, you go shout your question, but I have to repeat it so the people online can hear it. Oh. 38. He's 38. Lisa wanted to know how old Chris was now. For those of you who are at home, he's 38. He's been with us for 1 year. I hope you caught the thing, one of the things, well, everything. I hope you caught it all. But Warren brought up a really good point, is that we have continued to stay committed to our missions giving at Emmanuel. We obviously reduced staff big time during COVID, but we said, no, we made these commitments based on our income the previous year. We are giving that money no matter what, and we're proud of that. And I know pride is a dangerous thing in the Christian faith, but we thought, yeah, we could clutch our pearls, but that's not the point of God's kingdom. It's to continue to be a blessing even in difficult times, and so we are committed to continue that missions giving. Yeah, it's pretty fun. All right, next slide, Kathy. So right now you're going to be like, what's left to present? So I'm going to give you a brief history lesson, and this is going to be a lot of information, and I apologize for that, but I think it's going to help you to see the sort of congruity between each session for many years and what we've been working towards together. Not today and probably not this week, because I'm going For those of you that don't know, I'm going fishing from tomorrow to Thursday in the Mammoth Lakes, and I cannot wait. So if you email me anything about this this week, you're not going to get any comment back from me until later in the week. But we hope to actually upload a graphic that we've created, which is a timeline, and you can just see sorts of things that happened all the way back to 2016 or even 2015. So this is, I'm representing the session here. I apologize, I'm doing almost all the speaking, which is not really how I'd prefer this, but the reality is the week got shortened and I lost track of time. So, timeline. In 2015, we experienced something new as a congregation, which was Dana Shaw, our longtime beloved associate pastor, Dan Stevens, who brought in as the interim pastor, and myself as a nincompoop CRE, which stands for Commission Ruling Elder, which means I could do all pastoral functions without being ordained as a pastor. The three of us worked together. And for the first time in a long time, this church experienced a shared pastoral leadership, and we liked it. We really enjoyed it. We realized, man, we have all different gifts, and it's fun to do this together, and all the weight wasn't on one person. It felt wonderful to do it. And it was just a refreshing time, at least that might be our warped stance, but we got a lot of feedback that people really enjoyed that time. And so it shaped sort of how we worked together as a staff, that we wanted to be more collegial. We wanted to be less one person and then kind of the ranking, and just sort of say, ministry is meant to be shared. It's meant to be a group of people doing stuff. Okay, in 2016, Craig was called as our designated pastor, and he began with the session to bring in Fuller's consultation process with Todd Bolsinger, and we kind of discovered the DNA of our church. We're going to get to some of this briefly a little bit later. And I just have to share from my own perspective and the perspective of the session that Craig was the ultimate team player. When the PNC was looking for the next pastor, we said we need somebody who's collegial. We need somebody who wants to work together with a team. And the PNC had to say no to some fantastic pastors like, that's not how I work. It's my way or the highway. And we brought on Craig, and he showed us what it's like to be a team player. One person has said this multiple times, and just how rarely do pastors want to share the privilege and the prestige and all this stuff that sort of Craig was such a team player with me. He wasn't threatened by me. He was a mentor towards me. He was compassionate towards me. He let me do things that I had no practice in and said, this is how you learn. Go for it. And he was so great in that way. Craig also was a catalyst for some needed improvements that were happening around campus. The beauty of bringing in an outside source is they're not part of the system, and they kind of go, well, why do you guys do that? And you go, I don't know, we just do it. And he goes, but why? And he was helpful to see that. And so some of the improvements in Craig's time here is obviously we improved our sound system. We hired a communications director, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. We obviously transferred into chairs, knowing that this space was the biggest room we could use and the most multi-purpose place. And then the main thing that Craig did under his leadership was he transferred the power back to the session. The elders of the church that represent you, that are nominated by you and elected by you, took over ownership of the church. And I'll give you some examples. Every single time the elders get together, we look at the finances and we talk about it. At one point, and systems are different over time, but at one point it was more one person looked at the finances, and now every elder is really aware and responsible of the finances. It's been a blessing. All right, next slide. 2018, the property elder team, headed by Don Morgan at this time, and multiple members of the congregation, did a massive inventory of our whole campus. They compiled a list of everything that needs to be done, all the deferred maintenance, everything that's broken, everything that's going to break, and sort of said, here's our short-term plan, here's our 5-year plan, here's our 10-year plan of stuff that's kind of coming down the pipe that we are going to have to address or we haven't addressed. And so, again, under Craig's leadership, we have this document that sort of says, okay, here's what needs to be done to sort of revitalize our campus. At this point in time, we were also the session, this is all the way back at 2018, and conversations Craig and I were having, were very aware that our budget was an aspirational budget, that we were deficit spending every year because we sort of said, well, if we grow this place, we can support this budget. And the reality is it didn't happen, and most churches aren't. And so Craig and I had some conversations about what's the next step, how do we do this? if we're deficit spending, we're not being good stewards of the resources we're receiving from the congregation. And we started a conversation just between Craig and myself. This is also at the same time when we started to do some fun experiments after the consulting process. We realized we wanted to live into some of our code and move beyond church and cross and build bridges. And so we tried some things. We had a circus on our lawn, the Joy in the Journey group, which was MOPS, kind of a deeper version of MOPS, where moms and mentors come together to do Bible study, happened. We rethought Camp Joy and said we want to elevate some things that are important to people outside of church and things that are important to God by focusing on Christ's passion for arts and sciences. And things like that. There was a backyard current. So we tried to experiment. The reason I brought this up in the timeline is just to show you that we've been on a kind of trajectory of trying some things and seeing, does it work or does it not? Next slide, please. By 2019, the spring and summer of 2019, the session held 2 retreats, and a theme emerged out of those retreats was we need to do something, we need to make some changes to ensure that this is a sustainable place. And you can't deficit spend and go, this is sustainable. And so we realized some things needed to change. Now, this was one way the session is phrased is this was a rally cry for the session. This isn't like, Emmanuel's the church of sustainability. We don't mean like, this is not our mission. This is not why we exist, but we realize this is the burden of leadership, that we need to address some things to make sure that this is sustainable. Otherwise, we're not being good stewards of the resources that God has placed on your hearts to give to this church. And so during that season, Craig and the session and I were having conversations with COM, which is the Committee on Ministry. It's the committee that helps people in the ordination process, or not in ordination, in the call process, to try to figure out what are our options as a church. Sorry, Dale, I'm getting some weird feedback. It might be a monitor, but it might be me. Let me know if it's me and I need to change something. So we had some great conversations with COM in terms of, we have a 2-pastor model. We know that the future of this church is a 1-pastor model. What's the reality? What are our options? And COM and our presbytery were phenomenal in how they conversed with us and said what was possible and what wasn't possible. In October of 29, this was something Craig and I knew was going to happen, and something the session knew and was probably going to be happening just because it was the reality. We received Craig's resignation, and we kept him on for 6 more months so that he could search for a call, and he did, which is wonderful. And I just have to say, and we're going to stay on this slide for a while, Kathy. No, we're not. We're going to move it eventually. Craig was so gracious. So gracious. Craig and I knew as early as 2018 that this is going to have to change. And before you make cuts to your programs or your other staff, you've got 2 pastors, and there's only one way. And we had an honest conversation with the session and said, look, we know that one of us has to go, and we're open to, it can be either one of us. We're not going to force a hand and say, David has to stay or Craig has to stay. Like, we get this. And Craig and I had some great conversations about it, and I just am so thankful for his compassion and integrity. And he served here well, and he left well. And I am just so stinking proud of him and glad that he's my friend. And he has been very helpful over the last 15 months when I have been at my breaking point. Okay, on March 8th, this is crazy. On March 8th, we celebrated Craig. We went to Tarantula Hill, had pizza and some beverages, and said thank you. And the next Sunday, we shut down. That is a really fun transition to pastoral ministry, I got to tell you. It's like, wow, I'm like half terrified, half excited to be a pastor, and then I go, wait a second. Pastor of what and how and what? Okay. And then literally by 2020, May of 2020, we already started our reopening task force, which began to meet nearly weekly for God knows how long, but a long time. And by September of 2020, COM and in conjunction with our presbytery, I became officially designated pastor of the congregation, and we've endured 15 months of COVID since then. Super, super fun. Okay, now I do want to stay on this for a second. I have to tell you that the staff and the session of this church are incredible. In the 15-month window of COVID, I worked with 2 different sessions. We actually brought, we said goodbye to some elders and brought some new elders on. And the continuity of their faithfulness to this congregation is incredible. The staff, in the same way, they learned to pivot. They learned on the fly to serve this congregation. Debbie Barber provided families with material every single week. She drove materials to people's homes. She had Zoom meetings. She had story days in the park. She had mail for kids to open and to experience the love from their director. She just sent out survival kits for road trips because it's summer. People are going on road trips. Here's a survival kit so you can survive on road trip with your kids in a car for long. She did an incredible job pivoting. How do I do this? How do I do this? How do I meet this need? How do I serve this family? And I just want to say thank you to Debbie for your faithfulness to serve our kids in a really trying time. Jared Del Doso, our Director of Youth Ministry, and Danny Chulak, I'm going to say this wrong. It's not intern. Discipleship leader, got it. Yes. They held weekly Zoom meetings. They were able to recruit students who had moved away because now time and distance didn't matter. You could meet together online and live in Redlands or Yucaipa or Afghanistan. It doesn't matter. You could be present at youth group. It was awesome. By the way, they're at camp, or today they're leaving for Forest Home. They're taking our high schoolers back to camp. They've been ministering to these kids. Jared and Danny handwrite cards and deliver them via mail, and the students get to read what their leaders think about them and what they're being invited into. They played games together over the internet. They had Netflix viewing parties, so in the comfort of their own homes, the youth group could watch a movie together and hang out digitally in a space because they couldn't hang out together. Danny and Jared provided a place. This is so critical. They provided a place for teenagers to be teenagers online, and that is really hard. Really hard. And teenagers online are a handful. And Danny and Jared were faithful to serve our students. I am so grateful for their ministry. Sharon Lounsbury almost single-handedly held down the fort, navigated thousands of questions, concerns, angers, you name it. She was the front lines for thousands of conversations. All of our vendors she communicated to. She provided all the signage around the campus. She helped create protocols for the church and make sure that we were following them. She still had to oversee all of our bills, all of the payroll, all of our finances. And I have to emphasize this a lot. Things that you and I will never be aware of. Never be aware of. Meredith Sullivan, I cannot even begin to imagine how this church would have coped and handled communication during a time where we couldn't be together. The infrastructure she built with her team, including the Nanses, by renovating our website and having Facebook to communicate with people, and kind of doing a better job with some of our email stuff. I mean, there's the amount of things that she had already built into the system so that when we hit this shutdown, helped us survive and stay connected. And that's just the beginning. She single-handedly figured out live streaming. Thanks to a very generous donation, we were able to get the financial stuff to do the live streaming. So everything from figuring out the tech side, the logistics, to the art side to make it look good, partnering with Dale Berry, who has been a saint. Dale does more stuff here than I am even aware of, and I am aware of a lot, and I think, how are you doing it, man? How do you work full-time and serve this congregation? Single-handedly have been figuring out the audio stuff. These people are phenomenal. Our staff took on so many responsibilities during this year that were not included in their job descriptions. Several of them, while they had full-time children at home, had to figure out how to serve this congregation every single day. They attended weekly reopening committee meetings and thumbed through public policy, stuff that they have no training in, and they have been incredible. We're also in many ways one another support group. This has been a very difficult time. We were shoulders to cry on and sometimes shoulders to scream into, and I just have to say that this staff has been incredible. They are close-knit, they trust one another, And so much of our success is due to their faithfulness to this congregation and your faithfulness back to us. So I just want to say thank you to you guys. I mentioned Dale Berry, but there's a bunch of other volunteers who I'd like to mention. Included in them is Kathy Meyer, who's currently running our slides. Kathy Meyer was let go. And that's really hard. It's really hard to take on this position and then fire your friends. And Kathy handled it like a champ and has since, coming back together, volunteered hours to put together every slide you look at, to run audio. She helps put music together in the office. She has been such a servant to this church. And again, like Dale, putting in countless hours to make this thing fly. And I have to thank all these musicians too: Scott, Stacy, Kim, Bernadette, Lisa, Linda, Cheryl, Gary, John, Jess, all these people who have completely on a voluntary basis, since we've been able to meet back together, have been our music ministry. Has been such a gift, and it's a reminder of the skill and the talent that is in this congregation. And I know that I'm missing so many volunteers, people who come here and take care of the rock garden, and people who do landscaping, and people who help set up communion, and nursery care people, and there's just so many people that help this go. And I want to really thank, too, the session. I was meeting, I think I shared this with you guys some time ago, but I was meeting with a couple other pastors, and one of them was lamenting that there wasn't a single session member on their board that he felt like he could trust. And I feel like there's not a single session member that doesn't have this church's best interests in mind. There's not a single session member at this church that I couldn't trust and be my complete authentic self to. And it's been such a gift in a trying time where doubt creeps into your mind and fatigue creeps into your mind and just exhaustion creeps into your mind, that the session goes, we believe in you and we believe in this place. And it's been an honor to serve with the current elders and the past elders and the past elders and the past elders all the way back. Just an incredible, incredible group of people. And it's a gift to me. Speaking of the session, I want to talk about this sort of theme of sustainability for a moment and then move to sort of future thinking. I mentioned earlier in that 2019 retreat that sustainability emerged as a theme for us, that we just needed to pay attention to the financial reality of this place. And I'd like to, if you go to the next slide, Kathy, I want to talk about, oh gosh, I had a panic attack. I thought I lost my notes. It's like I'm missing some really important stuff. So this is a graphic that has been on the mind of the session. I don't expect you to be able to read this part. Don't worry about the left-hand side. We're going to talk about the right-hand side as sort of a summary of everything that's on the left. But we realized there were sort of 4 areas that as a leadership team we needed to be attentive to. And again, in a moment I'm going to tell you why we're saying this to you out loud. There were 4 areas that we needed to pay attention to in terms of sustainability. The first was we need to recover our financial health. We need to recalibrate leadership and staff. We need to revive our facility, and we need to sort of rethink or redesign Sunday morning in general, and that's worship and our resources. And so we're going to walk through all of those really briefly. I apologize, there's a ton of content. You don't have this in front of you. I know this is like, there's a Dodger game at 12:10. We'll try to be done. So in terms of recovering financial health, this first thing of sustainability, here's all the work your session has been up to. This is just me applauding our session, who've been so faithful. In their wisdom, years ago, set a $150,000 reserve fund to say, if a crisis happens, we can pay 3 to 6 months worth of our payroll. Guess what? Crisis happened, and we didn't even have to touch that. Wow. We made prudent decisions. Yes. We made prudent decisions, difficult decisions regarding our staffing needs, and they were accelerated by COVID-19. Yes, we did have to let go of some staff members, and it was very hard and painful. We also used the PPP loan that we received to continue to pay those staff members, even after we let them go, because we felt that that was the right thing to do. And we've been having conversations as early as 2018 and 2019 to say we do need to oh, that's the next one. I don't know where. I'm going to wait for that next one. We also presented a balanced and conservative budget. No longer have we been presenting aspirational budgets to you to say, hey, we need to you need to increase your giving by 10% in order for us to meet our budget. No, we're saying this is our reality, and so we've presented a sort of balanced budget to you, one that is good stewarding. And we also started revisions on how to do our budget and processing. At one point, as I said, it was sort of one elder was in charge of the whole budget, and now the whole session has ownership. Every time we see a spreadsheet of our spending, of our giving, all that stuff, it's wonderful. Okay. The second part was recalibrate leadership and staff. The session was aware that we needed to change something because our previous staffing model was unsustainable. It just wasn't sustainable. And so we knew the first thing to do is go from a 2-pastor model to a 1-pastor model. If we're going to have to make cuts, let's start at the top. That's our biggest expenditure. And so we did that. And again, that was out of the graciousness of Craig. We also realized we needed to bring on some other people in this time. And so we hired Meredith Sullivan as our director of communications. And we're so thankful we did because it was such an important role and has been at this church. We did have to modify our staffing model, especially when COVID hit. It accelerated some of the decisions we knew we were going to have to make down the line. We didn't know exactly when, but we knew we were going to have to reduce our staff. And so when COVID hit, we did. We made those reductions, and it was difficult, it was painful, and it was hard. And I won't sugarcoat that. We also started to have conversations about, well, what does a sustainable staffing model look like? What kind of positions do we need to have, or do we need to modify? And this was sort of saying, based on our actual numbers, who we actually are, not who we've been, not who we think we're going to be, but like who we are now and the people we have now. What do we need to meet the needs of this church and to serve our larger community? And those are conversations that were happening all the way back in 2018 and 2019 at the leadership level. Okay, I'm almost there, guys. We also said, how do we need to change our session? Are there roles that we've just kept perpetuating on session that should change? You know, do we always keep this system? Like, do we need to have somebody in charge of research and development, for example? Or somebody over session who says, let's take some risks and have some fun in our community. Or, hey, we really need, anyway, so the recalibrating leadership and staff wasn't just staff, it was all roles. Next was reviving our facility was something we knew that we needed to do. We've been the benefactors of this beautiful renovation to our children's ministry area. This outdoor playground has been beautiful and wonderful. So that's all been the work of the session and you. Obviously, sanctuary chairs, the sound system. We now have live streaming. These have been modifications to revive our facility to make it more useful. We've also, the creation of that property document I talked about, and then just the awareness of the ton of deferred maintenance around our campus. Finally, the rethinking Sunday morning, our resources in our worship. You know, obviously the chairs have allowed for more movement in this room, that we can reconfigure the room in multiple ways, we can adapt on the fly. The contemporary service moved back into this service over the years. We've had some creative elements in the service, response stations where you could go sign up for a book club or break up herbs and smell them, and that was related to the sermons. For one Palm Sunday, we create a flower mural that then died by Good Friday, and we've been able to use the space in a more interactive way because of some of the foresight of the leadership. Okay, the goal is to continue for Sunday morning. The goal is to continue to maintain the things that we need to keep. We're never going to get rid of music. We're never going to get rid of scripture. We're never going to get rid of prayer. We're never going to get rid of sermons. But we are thinking, how many resources get poured into making this happen? And it's tons, especially when we were doing 2 services. And so the leadership has been sort of saying, what resources do we actually have to continue to do all this stuff? And especially now, with COVID, we know there's been a lot of shuffling of people to and from other churches, and we'll have to discern, what do we actually have the resources to pull off on Sunday mornings in the future? So that's all been on the mind of the leadership for some time. Okay, and finally, communications up here is the wheel that helps spin it. We realize we need to be able to be transparent with you. We need to communicate with you and articulate some of the stuff. So this is step 1 in communicating that with you. Meredith wanted me to be very explicit that Meredith is not the communications wheel spinning to make sure all of this happens. It's the leadership of this church that is the communications wheel conveying all this information to you. Okay, now we finally get to the fun stuff. So what's next? What does the future look like at Emmanuel? You can go ahead and go to the next slide, I think, Kathy. Yeah, that's right. All right. Cool. So the reality is that every church is emerging out of this whirlwind of the last 15 months, and every church is looking different. They are looking to be faithful to God while still assessing what the heck just happened, who's here, what does our church look like now, and sort of processing and discerning. I would say on some level, this is really exciting. It's fun to sort of be like, all right, so who's God calling us to be now? And on the other hand, it's sort of nerve-wracking to be like, it's scary to think, what is God calling us to become now? Who are we? Who really is Emmanuel now? Here's what we know. God is faithful, and we will be faithful back to God. So what do we do now? What can you expect from the leadership from your church? We are going to continue to be good stewards of resources. We are not going to make any long-term new hires or commitments to new staff positions. We're going to live in the sort of basic for now. We're going to relearn the basics of church. We're going to deprofessionalize the ministry a little bit. We want to put the ministry back into your hands. This has been so fantastic having volunteers. It's also hard because it makes work for other people, and there's not one singular person kind of overseeing it. And yet, it's beautiful because the music ministry has gone back into the hands of the people. Not that it wasn't before, but we're deprofessionalizing it a little bit. We will continue to present balanced budgets to you in the coming years. We will be operating in reality, not in aspiration. We will continue to be a church that bridges differences. 15 months of confrontation we experienced, line drawing, people becoming more and more fully entrenched in their camps. We at Emmanuel want to model moving towards one another rather than away from one another. Jared preached just a couple of weeks ago that your enemy is the person outside your circle of empathy. And that puts the onus on us. We are in a culture right now that is asking us to shrink our circle of empathy, that wants us to walk away from our enemies, that is pitting us against one another. My commitment to this congregation is to be a long-suffering pastor. The only way to do that is to be in relationship with one another, is to share life together, not to make demands of each other or quick fixes, but to say we're in it for the long haul because we care about each other. And so I want our circles of empathy to grow. Rather than saying, I cannot love you because you said this, or you've drawn this line, or you can't love me because I'm this kind of person. I want this church to become a place where we move towards each other rather than away from each other, where we are constantly trying to bridge the gap between the extremes. And I will tell you, if you land on either extreme, in literally any area, theological extreme, political extreme, this is probably not the church for you. As a pastor, that's really hard to say. But if you need your church to do this, or you need your church to do this, we're saying we want to become a little bit more like this. We move towards each other. Now, it doesn't mean we don't stand for some really important things, and we will draw some lines. But moving towards each other is more important than walking away from each other. I think this is exactly what Jesus' ministry modeled. He was consistently trying to get extreme groups together. The poorest of the poor, he said, forgive your enemies. To the wealthy, he said, give away your money. To the Pharisees, he said, be loving, be like God. He was constantly bridging people together, and it took the church a long time to get it. Peter himself, even in Acts, doesn't get it for a long time, and he's got to learn, hey, don't call things unclean that are clean. Like, stop drawing these lines. Come together. Jesus came incarnate because he wanted one faith, one body, one church with many parts, one humanity. And I want that for us too. Our circles of empathy must grow, not contract. I'm getting close to being done, I promise. We will continue to be a church that provides worship every single week. But we are also aware that we spend a ton of time, money, and resources on this singular hour. I was talking to a good friend the other day who a couple weeks ago was driving, his name's Jeff, and he was driving his 15-year-old son to church. And they both kind of looked at each other and said, I don't really want to go to church today. And the dad said, I don't actually want to go to church today either. You want to stop at this park and feed people? And they did. They went out and bought a bunch of meals and fed people at the park. And he sort of said it, he doesn't go to this church, so don't try to figure out who it is. You can tell, he said it with a little bit of shame in his voice. And I said, Jeff, you mean instead of going to church, you wanted to be the church? And he just smiled, and I said, I feel like that's probably a really positive memory for you and your son, that you went out and were the church rather than coming to church. I said, that's some of the stuff our session is wrestling with now, is we spend so much time, and this is an incredible time, we spend so much time and energy and resources for this hour that we're thinking, are we still being joyful to our community? Are we still inviting people to the banquet? And yes, of course, there's so many great ministries, but how can we be a little bit more intentional about being witnesses in our community? We want to have a greater impact in our community. It's the crux of the gospel. It's what Jesus modeled. It is the Christian call. We don't have total clarity on what that looks like. I have some dreams. I really do. I have some wild dreams about what I'd love this church to become that are really consistent with our past legacy. And we don't know exactly how to implement them. The session doesn't know all of my dreams yet, but I just want to reassure you that we're working together and we realize there is a hunger to serve again. Just as much as there was a hunger to get back to worship, the distance from people, the inability to run some of the ministries that we've been doing, we're like, we want to get back to doing that, to serving Christ and his kingdom. We will do that. So I'll conclude by saying this. We may not have a crystal clear vision for what our future looks like together, what exactly Emmanuel is going to look like, but we know how we want to behave. We want to love each other. We want to move towards each other. We want to become we want to become beacons of Christ's love in a divided world, where people are constantly taking sides and pushing others away or walking away from one another. We are going to choose not to. Jesus' way was to bridge differences. And I hope that is part of our future together at Emmanuel. If you have any questions, go ahead and you can come up to the microphone. It can be anything like, hey, what's going on with this? What's going on with that? We're going to go ahead and spend a couple of minutes. And if you're online and you want to type in a question, I believe Meredith will try to relay that with Morse code or sign language to me. But if you have any questions about anything going on that's been presented, feel free to come up or raise your hand and ask them. And when you come up, for the sake of the listeners, will you just state your name? Man, you guys are making this kind of easy. You're like, no, we've been at church for 2 hours. Get us out of here. Okay. I mean, be brave. It's okay. Yeah, go ahead. Come on up here. I know your name, but come up here and say your name. And say hi to the camera. You're now... I muted it. It's my fault. Sorry, Robert. Okay.
Hi, Robert Luce with Emmanuel. My question is on-campus events.
What kind of events?
Buddy break or
yes,
others?
Okay.
Or
Great.
others?
Perfect. Okay, Robert's asking a question probably many of you are asking. So he brought up hey, when are we going to be able to do buddy break again? Or some people when can we have a church potluck? Because there's a hunger to be together, right? Or even when will youth group activities move indoors versus outdoors? All that I would say is still up for discernment. In the fall, things like we're working with MOPS and some other ministries to try to figure out. Let me rephrase that. We are prioritizing Emmanuel's ministries in this season to try to figure out, can our people begin or continue the ministries that have stopped before we start having a whole bunch of third-party ministries on our campus? Because we want to just make sure protocols are being enforced, and also we know it's a volatile situation. The Delta variant has been. Can I share an anecdotal story? I go to the mall a lot because I have a teenage son. I shared with you that earlier, and. Every week when I drop him off, it's no big deal. There's no there's no cars in line to get COVID tested. And I dropped him off on Friday, and there were 45 cars in line to get rapid tests for COVID. And you just kind of go, we're going to be cautious. We are certainly going to be having events, and we're still discerning that. We don't have a set date for hey, Buddy Break will start this date. But we will work with any ministry that thinks, hey, we want to start, and we'd like to start at this time. Come talk to me. talk to Chris Meyer or a session member, and we'd love to partner with you to figure out how do we do this ministry and pull it off. Thanks, Robert. That's a great question. Any other questions? Y'all hungry? Yeah. Pat just said, is coffee off the table because of the germ issue and all that stuff? To be honest, we haven't completed that conversation yet. We have had we've sort of been triaging every week, like realizing, oh, we didn't know this about live streaming, or oh, I didn't realize I can't show hook in a service, or any number of things, right? And then the other part is, going to the coffee part, is just trying to figure out, do we have the human power to pull off all the things we once did? And so that is one of the things that we'll be talking about in the near future. We really thought, let's go a season. We figured, let's implement things we know that will be easy to pull back if something changes. And so we sort of started slow, and I don't have a good answer for when coffee will happen, but we can't live too long without coffee. Yes, Pat said there's a necessity for people just to get together and be, and the reality is coffee provided that. You could just go hang out on the patio. Yeah. Yes, Jackie, I think. Jackie said, did I mention choir? No, I did not, but I was hoping that would get called into attention here. So because we're not making any long-term commitments to new staff, because we want to make sure, finish this year and say, what is our real financial reality? We won't be hiring any choir director or an accompanist because it's not sustainable. And so the leadership of the church is wrestling with, so how do we do music ministry with a much reduced staffing model? So here's my favorite thing. This is a little tongue-in-cheek, but I'm going to say it because I'm on only one more year contract. You guys could say no to me in a year, and I want you to know who I really am. I don't want to fake it. We are not getting rid of the choir. Every single pastor at this church, since I've been here, has been accused of trying to get rid of the choir. Every single one! Oh, I know, but I'm not, sorry, Jackie, this is not what I'm pressing this in my own dysfunction, not, no. We want a choir, but the reality is we can't hire a professional choir director. We can't hire an accompanist because A, it's not sustainable, and B, it's just not sustainable. So how can we have the choir up front and singing? So my guess is in the near future, we will ask the choir to sing along with some of our songs. So, like last week we did, They Will Know We Are Christians by Our Love, and we've had many traditional Sundays since we've been meeting back together, and there'll be a time where we're going to ask the choir to be our chorus or to sing along to the songs. But at this point, unless we have a really skilled volunteer step up who wants to be director, who might want to lead in a couple of anthems, which if any of you have that skill, I do not, we will gladly have a choir. But for at this point, and again, part of it too was, you'll notice, it's only been about 3 Sundays now that we've moved the chairs together, and there was some concern about having people sitting too close together initially. So will we have a choir? Yes. Will it look the same? Probably not, at least not in the near future, just because we can't make a commitment financially to that. But it's the same reason our band doesn't look the same, and our staff doesn't look the same, and our office administrator doesn't look the same, and our childcare workers don't look the same. The reality is this was a really hard year where things that are beloved and people that are beloved had changed, shifted. The reality shifted, and so we're navigating that. But music ministry will always be and always has been an important part of this church, and we will continue to be faithful. And to Jackie's point, it's been really, I already shared it, never mind. Yes?
Is there any way to spend money on music without it being a long-term commitment to it? Can we, put up, like, each Sunday there's a certain budget for music, and whoever wants to take that on and say, sign me up, or we can put like a sign-up sheet where I'm signing up for this Sunday and this amount of money is available to whoever wants to cover music, just that we're still investing in that.
Great question. So the question was, is there a way that we can allocate a certain amount of resources per Sunday to pay for some music, so that, and people could sort of sign up and be the sort of, maybe the person in charge of that Sunday and organize all that stuff. That's actually what Chris was referencing when he stood up here to say our costs are going to increase in the second half of this year as we get back together, because I'm tired of picking music. I'm tired of arranging music. I don't have any expertise in music. and I have to recruit all the people and put all that stuff together. And so so the answer is yes. The question will be how much can we allocate per Sunday to do that, and what kind of skilled person will sign up for that. And so that's part of our discernment processes. We intend to have somebody oversee music. That's not me. Praise the good Lord Almighty. And the question is when and how much. But it won't look like our previous music model where we paid a three-quarter time choir director, a half-time accompanist, and several musicians in the contemporary service. It will look. Just to be fair, I want to make sure I repeat your comment. She said, I just want to make sure I see our musicians being paid. I just want to make sure it's not fair for me to edit out comments. So, any other questions? This is great. And and Meredith, any online questions at this point? Excellent. Okay, anything else? Any questions? Yes, Robert Luce.
Will there be like a get-together at some point?
Will there be a get-together at some point? You mean this isn't riveting enough for you? I'm teasing. Yeah, that's all the stuff that, again, we've been a little cautious about. You guys know the reality. You've all participated in the reality. And I'll just share this with you because, again, I'm being vulnerable and honest. Any and every decision that has been made by a single staff member or a session member has been both received well and criticized. And we're realizing it is impossible in this time period to please everyone. It's impossible. So if we put on a program, a certain demographic feels excluded, and that's okay. And it's not okay that they're excluded. We all have to make adult decisions. We all have to make decisions based on what we're comfortable with and what we're not comfortable with. For a long time, we erred on the side of cautiousness, and we got, fair enough, some criticism, like, hey, well, all these other people are doing this stuff. Why isn't our church? We said, well, we're going to cater to sort of the least of these in this situation. And then we've opened up, and we've got some other criticism, like, hey, but what about me? And that's okay. That's human. And especially at a time where we've been so split up and so divided and so angsty and angry, once we get a taste or a glimpse of this reemerging comfort and the sort of things that have been important to us, sometimes we get a little, we want our stuff. And all I say is, we don't know when we'll have some kind of formal get-together. We're continuing to monitor all of our situations. We know how important fellowship is to the life of the congregation, especially now that we have had so little fellowship. So I wouldn't be surprised at some point when it's safe, collectively, and we make this decision, that we will have a massive potluck in here where we are eating and hanging out and listening to music and who knows what other things. So, or even outdoors. But yeah, the things you're asking are so, they belong so deeply to the recesses of our heart, of things that are good and that we long for and we want to engage in again. And we appreciate your patience, all of you, because I think everyone on every side has had to exhibit some degree of patience in this very long season. So, are there current plans? No, but the staff is getting together after my fishing trip to talk about the fall and sort of say what's on the calendar and what's not on the calendar. Great question. Anything else? Dodgers start in 1 minute.
There's probably no carpinteria this year.
There's no carpinteria this year. In fact, this is a pet peeve of mine. I love carpinteria. You all know camping is my favorite thing in the entire world. The new registration system makes it very difficult to do any large group camping thing. But we will go camping again, don't you worry. I've got some ideas. Here's how I'd like to end. I want to end, I hope this has been positive. I know it's a lot of information. You're probably like, I can't remember what you said 40 minutes ago. But as I was thinking about this meeting, and as Warren and Chris were preparing, and as the session and I talked about this, I want it to be clear. The Dodger game is on, and God is like, wrap it up. Jesus has been so faithful to this church. And Jesus has been and will forever be central to who we are. We've all been asked to take on a lot of identities this year and side with identities this year and sort of say, I'm this camp. And we're going to camp with Jesus. And I want to thank this congregation for your faithfulness. We've navigated a really tough season, and I'm proud of this congregation, and I'm proud of this leadership. I'm proud of this session. I'm proud of this staff. Have we ticked people off? Yes. Have we done some things wrong? Certainly. But I'm proud of you guys. I'm proud of our leadership. It is an absolute privilege to serve this congregation. And I know we've got a bright future ahead. Again, I don't know exactly what it looks like, but I hope you and I will discern with the Spirit what God's calling us into. Here's what I do know. I don't know exactly where we're going or what it's going to look like, but I know how we're going to behave, and we're going to bridge differences. We're going to move towards each other. We're going to embrace each other, and we're going to love each other well, because the Christian witness needs it. The Christian witness needs it. The church, big church, has done more harm than good in the last 15 months. And we're in the business of doing good, because that's who Jesus is. Would you conclude this time with me with a prayer? Jesus, thank you for your faithfulness. We serve you and you alone. Tear down the idols in our lives that compete for your love, for your affection, for your attention. Help us long to spend time with you so that we would be shaped into people who then behave like you, able to bridge differences, move people from extremes into passion, compassion, empathy, and forgiveness. Thank you for the rich, rich legacy of this church, for all the saints who've gone before us, for being faithful to build this place for us to serve. But Jesus, don't let our imaginations be stuck in just this place. Move us into your world. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. That will conclude our meeting. You guys have a great week. I'll see you next Sunday, where we'll talk about our last parable.